Samantha Hill, 28 years old, stood behind the counter of the Lakeside Diner in New Jersey, absently wiping a coffee mug for what felt like the 10th time in an hour. Her slim figure, wrapped in a slightly faded uniform, was made taller by the simple black sneakers she wore. She kept her brown hair in a neat ponytail, but a few stray strands always slipped free to brush against her tired cheeks. It was late afternoon, the time of day when sunlight slanted through the large front windows, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. Classic rock played softly from an old jukebox in the corner, competing with the low hum of the diner's overhead lights. She couldn't deny a lingering heaviness behind her eyes. Rent was almost due, and tips so far had been meager. She glanced over to see Rachel Adams, her co-worker and friend, placing a basket of fries in front of a truck driver. Rachel, 32, wore her bright red hair loose around her shoulders. She had a warm smile and a knack for making customers laugh. But even her typically jovial nature seemed a touch subdued this evening. "Sam," Rachel called, noticing Samantha's distant expression. "You need to breathe. It's only 3 more hours before close." Her tone was light, but Samantha could hear the concern underneath. She forced a small smile and resumed wiping the counter. "I'm fine," she replied gently. "Just thinking about bills." They both understood how crucial every tip was. The Lakeside Diner, with its retro neon sign and decades-old decor, had regulars who appreciated the hometown feel, but the place wasn't bustling with big spenders. Samantha knew that if the end of the month arrived without a better windfall, she might struggle to pay her rent again. Her shift had started early that morning with a constant rhythm of refilling coffees, balancing trays, and offering a friendly ear to patrons, swapping stories about their day. One table held an elderly couple who always ordered the same tuna melt and side salad. Across from them sat a pair of teenagers, sharing a milkshake, chattering about a local baseball game. Samantha moved among them with the practiced grace of someone who'd done this for years. She recalled how, as a child, she dreamed of traveling the country or opening a small bakery of her own. Somewhere along the line, her goals had narrowed to simply staying afloat. She didn't feel sorry for herself exactly. Her sense of responsibility was too strong for that, but some nights she wondered if her life would ever be more than a struggle. Still, she clung to her integrity like a life raft. Whenever a customer handed her too much cash by mistake, she carefully counted the change and returned the surplus. People called her too honest for her own good. Samantha never liked the idea of getting ahead through dishonesty. Hearing the bell above the diner's door jingle, she looked up. A rush of cool evening air accompanied a man in a rumpled jacket, eyes scanning the menu board. Rachel went over to greet him, giving Samantha a moment to rest. The tension in her shoulders, however, did not ease. She caught sight of the manager, Mike Roberts, stepping out from the back office. In his mid-40s, with thinning hair and a serious demeanor, Mike took pride in running a tight ship. He offered Samantha a quick nod as if to say, "Hang in there." She nodded back, grateful for the silent encouragement. As the sun dipped lower, the interior lights seemed harsher, illuminating the faded posters of baseball legends and neon signs advertising root beer floats. Samantha moved to clear a corner booth, collecting half-finished cups of coffee and ketchup-stained plates. She paused, noticing how deserted the diner felt compared to the hustle of the morning shift. A vague sense of anticipation flickered inside her, like the shadow of an approaching storm. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was just the weariness talking. But as she wiped crumbs from the tabletop, she felt a tiny shiver, a nudge in her gut that told her something out of the ordinary was about to unfold. Still, she pushed the thought aside, trying to focus on the present. In less than 3 hours, she would be back on the bus to her small apartment, her tips stuffed into the pocket of her apron. Maybe tomorrow would be brighter, she mused, forcing a bit of optimism into her heart. Unbeknownst to her, the routine she clung to so tightly was about to be interrupted in a way she never expected. It was near closing when Samantha noticed the wallet for the first time. The diner had mostly emptied, leaving behind only the lingering scent of fresh coffee and a stubborn stack of dirty dishes in the sink. She was clearing one of the last tables, a corner booth that had been vacated minutes earlier, when her fingers brushed against something under the seat. It felt like soft leather. She knelt, peering closer, and discovered a sleek black wallet jammed between the seat cushion and the wall. It was heavier than she expected. At first, she assumed someone had left a standard billfold with a couple of cards and a bit of cash. But as she flipped the wallet open, her breath caught. There, neatly tucked in several compartments, were crisp $100 bills and platinum credit cards, each bearing the same embossed name, Derek Morris. One card, in particular, stood out, a luxurious black one she'd only heard about in whispered conversations. It was the kind that usually belonged to wealthy CEOs or celebrities. Her pulse quickened. She glanced around, half expecting the wallet's owner to rush back through the door, frantic to retrieve his possessions. But the diner was silent, and the only other person in sight was Rachel, wiping down the counter. The notion of holding so much money and privilege in her hands made her palms sweat. Samantha's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The rent was overdue, and in her apron pocket, she barely had enough tips to cover groceries for the week. A part of her, a voice she rarely acknowledged, wondered if she could just slip a single bill out of that wallet. Who would know? She'd never done anything remotely dishonest in her life, yet here lay enough cash to solve multiple problems at once. Her heart pounded as she carefully closed the wallet. Shaking off the temptation, she reminded herself that no amount of financial desperation could justify theft. It was not in her nature to take what wasn't hers. Still, she couldn't deny the jolt of unease and longing that surfaced in those few seconds. Standing, she steadied her breath and pressed the wallet to her chest. Rachel must have caught sight of Samantha's wide eyes. "What's that? You look like you've just seen a ghost," she called from across the diner. "Somebody left a wallet," Samantha answered, her voice trembling slightly. It's full of cash, Rach, and these fancy credit cards." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Are you serious? Let me see." She walked over, her own curiosity evident. Together, they peeked inside. Rachel let out a low whistle, her gaze flicking up toward Samantha's face. "Wow, this is no joke. Bet whoever owns this is panicking right now." Samantha nodded, her grip still firm. "I need to take this to Mike. It's too big to ignore. If the person doesn't come back tonight, at least our manager can lock it up safely." Without hesitation, Samantha crossed the diner toward Mike Roberts' small office in the back. The door was ajar, allowing a glimpse of him hunched over paperwork. She knocked on the frame, clearing her throat. He looked up, concern flickering across his features as soon as he saw her expression. "What is it, Sam?" She held out the wallet. "Someone left this behind. It's got a lot of money and some high-end credit cards. Name on them is Derek Morris." Mike took it gingerly, flipping through the contents. "You weren't kidding. This is substantial." He snapped it shut and leaned back. "I'll secure it in the safe until we can contact the owner. Good work, Samantha." There was an odd mix of gratitude and disbelief in his tone. Her shoulders loosened slightly, relief settling over her. As she left the office, she spotted Rachel watching from afar, arms folded, giving her a nod of approval. Samantha's stomach still churned with the memory of those $100 bills. She knew she'd done the right thing, but a pang of regret gnawed at her. She was too honest, perhaps, to the point that she might never climb out of her financial hole. Yet, she refused to dwell on the doubt. Instead, she told herself that some acts were simply the right thing to do, no matter how dire one's circumstances. Straightening her posture, she prepared to finish her shift, unaware that in returning that wallet, she had just triggered a series of events far beyond her imagination. Later that night, Samantha found herself riding the nearly empty metro train back to her small apartment. She sat with her apron balled up in her lap, eyes fixed on the dark windows that reflected her weary face. The city's lights flickered by, but her mind swirled elsewhere, replaying the moment she'd discovered the wallet and the surge of temptation she'd felt. She remembered the crispness of those bills, the glint of that elite black credit card. Part of her was ashamed she'd even considered taking anything. Another part argued that, in desperate times, people sometimes made desperate choices. But no matter how her thoughts tried to justify it, Samantha couldn't imagine living with herself if she stole. Honesty was the one thing she clung to, especially when everything else felt uncertain. Her phone buzzed, shaking her from her reverie. Rachel's name lit up the screen. Samantha answered with a sigh. "Hey, you get home okay?" Rachel's voice was gentle, concerned. "On the train now," Samantha said, forcing a small smile. "I'll be fine." Rachel hesitated. "Listen, Sam, I know you're behind on your rent. It's got to be tough seeing all that money and giving it back without a second thought, but you did the right thing." Samantha shut her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her like a riptide. "Yeah, I know. Just life would be easier if I didn't need to worry about every dollar. But returning that wallet was the only option I could live with. That's who you are," Rachel said firmly. "Don't let your doubts eat you up." When the call ended, Samantha laid her phone on her lap, exhaling slowly. She thought back to times in her life when being honest had cost her, whether in small interactions or bigger issues, like a previous landlord who tried to overcharge her. She'd confronted him, refusing to play along, and it had resulted in a hurried search for a new place. Although she never regretted her principles, she did wonder if life would have been smoother had she learned to compromise. The train rattled into a station, its overhead lights glaring in the near-empty car. Stepping onto the platform, Samantha felt the sting of the chilly night air. Her apartment building stood a few blocks away, a modest, aging structure with a worn exterior and flickering porch lights. She ascended the creaking stairs to the second floor, fiddling with her keys until the lock gave way. Inside, the space was cramped. A single room that doubled as living area and bedroom, plus a tiny kitchen nook. The furniture was worn but tidy, a second-hand couch, a small table, and a lamp perched on a wobbly side table. She dropped her apron onto the counter and opened the fridge, retrieving the last container of leftover soup. A wave of frustration hit her as she thought about the rent notice pinned to the wall. It would have been so easy to slide one of those bills into her pocket, she thought. No one would know, but she would. That alone made any gain impossible to enjoy. She forced herself to remember that tomorrow was another day, another chance to earn tips. Maybe, she fantasized fleetingly, the owner of that wallet would tip her or the diner once he realized someone had returned it intact. Yet, she quickly dismissed the idea. Life rarely handed out rewards so simply. She'd been raised to believe in hard work and self-respect, even if the world wasn't fair. Flicking on the small TV for background noise, she sipped her soup, the warmth chasing some of the chill from her body. As she curled up on the couch to rest, her mind circled back to the name on those cards, Derek Morris. It sounded distinguished, almost too grand for a place like Lakeside Diner. She imagined him noticing his wallet missing, racking his brain about where he'd misplaced it. Sleep tugged at her, a heavy reminder that she had another shift to work in the morning. She wondered, just before drifting off, if her moment of honesty might ever amount to more than another story she told herself to stay upright. The following day dawned brighter, but Samantha's nerves were still knotted as she walked into the Lakeside Diner. She half expected Derek Morris to come rushing in, demanding to speak with whoever had found his wallet. Instead, the morning crowd was the usual mix of families grabbing a quick breakfast and regulars sipping coffee while reading the local paper. Behind the counter, Mike Roberts greeted her with a curt nod. "Morning," he said, flipping through a clipboard. "Listen, Sam, I got a hold of Mr. Morris's office. Looks like he's some big shot. They were eager to send someone to pick up the wallet, but he insisted on coming himself this afternoon." Samantha felt a tightening in her chest. She'd hoped the issue would resolve quietly, but apparently Mr. Morris had other ideas. She wasn't sure what to expect, a scolding, accusations, or maybe just a cold, formal thank you. "We'll keep it low-key," Mike went on, catching the apprehension in her eyes. "I'll hand over the wallet when he arrives." "But he specifically asked to speak to the person who found it." She swallowed. "All right, if that's what he wants." Word spread quickly among the staff, and by lunchtime, Samantha noticed curious glances from co-workers whenever the door chimed. Some of them, like Chris, a younger waiter, muttered snide remarks about fishing for a reward. Others were supportive, including Rachel, who gave Samantha's arm a light squeeze, saying, "Hey, you did an honest thing. Don't worry." But Samantha couldn't help feeling uneasy. She found herself wiping tables more rigorously than usual, as though scrubbing away her own tension. By early afternoon, a hush fell over the diner when a tall man in a tailored suit walked in, phone pressed to his ear. He had dark hair, neatly combed, and an air of confidence that made heads turn. Mike recognized him at once and approached with a polite greeting. Samantha hovered by the coffee station, her heart thumping. Derek Morris ended his call, stepped forward, and accepted the wallet from Mike. He examined the contents quickly, appearing relieved. Then, with a furrowed brow, he asked in a measured tone, "May I meet the waitress who found this?" Mike gestured towards Samantha, who reluctantly set down her cleaning rag and came forward. Up close, she noticed faint lines of stress etched on Derek's forehead. Though clearly well off, he looked tired, as if life had been demanding more of him than he cared to admit. "I'm Derek Morris," he said, offering a polite smile. "You must be Samantha." He extended a hand. She shook it, her palm slightly damp. "Yes, sir. I'm glad we could get your wallet back to you." She hoped her voice sounded steady. He tucked the wallet into his suit pocket and nodded. "I appreciate that you turned it in with everything intact. Most people—" He hesitated, catching himself. "Well, let's just say it's refreshing to encounter real honesty." Unsure how to respond, Samantha merely nodded. She expected him to hand her a reward then and there, perhaps peel off a few of those crisp bills. Instead, he studied her silently, a curious glint in his eyes. At last, he cleared his throat. "Actually, I'd like to offer my thanks in a more personal way. If you're comfortable with that, could I treat you to coffee, maybe after your shift?" His tone was polite, not overbearing. Mike, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. Samantha was taken aback. She could almost hear Chris snickering behind the counter, conjuring some rumor about this invitation. The idea of being alone with a wealthy stranger, even if well-intentioned, unsettled her. Yet she found herself intrigued too. This was no everyday occurrence. When she hesitated, Derek added gently, "No obligation. I just want to learn more about the person who reminded me there's still good in the world." Rachel shot Samantha an encouraging look, while Mike simply shrugged, leaving the decision to her. Samantha took a breath. "All right," she said, voice soft. "I get off around 6. Derek inclined his head in gratitude. "Great, I'll swing by around then." With that, he turned and left, the bell jingling behind him. The diner remained quiet for a moment, all eyes on Samantha. Her cheeks grew warm under the attention. She returned to wiping counters, her mind a whirl of questions. Part of her wished for a simple handshake and a goodbye, but destiny, it seemed, had other plans for them both. Evening arrived with an undercurrent of anticipation humming through the lakeside diner. Samantha tried to go about her duties, refilling water glasses and fetching checks, but her eyes kept darting to the clock mounted on the wall above the kitchen door. The hours passed in a blur of orders and polite smiles, her thoughts snagging on Derek Morris's unexpected invitation. At 5:30, Rachel sidled up beside her. "You look like you're going to jump out of your skin," she whispered, eyeing the tension in Samantha's shoulders. "I still can't believe he wants to talk to me," Samantha admitted, stacking plates. "It feels like a setup for something I'm not ready to handle." Rachel shrugged. "Maybe it's not as complicated as you think. He could just be grateful. But if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to go." Samantha paused. She mulled over the possibility of refusing to meet him. Yet something, an odd combination of curiosity and a faint hope, urged her not to dismiss the opportunity. "No," she said slowly, "I think I'll do it. I want to see what he has to say." By 6 o'clock, the diner had mostly cleared out, with only a few stragglers finishing dessert. Samantha clocked out and removed her apron, smoothing the wrinkles from her blouse. She caught her reflection in the stainless steel panel by the service window, noticing the hint of nerves in her own eyes. Her hair, still pulled back, showed a strand or two escaping. She tucked them behind her ear, mustering composure. Derek arrived almost on the dot, wearing a slightly less formal jacket this time, as though trying to blend in. He greeted Samantha with a polite nod, ignoring the curious glances from the remaining staff. Rachel gave Samantha a discreet thumbs up from behind the counter. They stepped outside into the mild spring evening. The sun was setting, streaking the sky with orange and pink. Samantha felt the cool breeze brush her cheeks, bringing temporary relief to the warmth of embarrassment creeping over her. She wondered if they'd just stand on the sidewalk awkwardly, or if he had a place in mind. "Would you like to grab a coffee somewhere less hectic?" Derek offered, as if reading her thoughts. "I noticed a cafe down the block." She nodded, falling into step beside him. The street was lined with small businesses closing up for the night, their windows darkening as employees locked doors. Derek tried small talk first, asking about the diner's hours and the daily routine. Samantha answered politely, though her responses were short, her mind still buzzing with uncertainty. At the cafe, they found a small table by the window. The decor was cozier here than at the diner, soft lamplight, shelves stacked with books, a chalkboard menu announcing specialty brews. Derek ordered 2 coffees, and when they arrived, he inhaled the aroma before speaking. "I'm sorry if this is unusual," he began, keeping his voice gentle. "I realize I'm practically a stranger, but your honesty really struck me. I've encountered a lot of people in my life who only see me for what I can offer. Money, connections, all that." Samantha stirred cream into her cup, trying to gauge his expression. "Well, to be fair," she said, "I didn't know you were important. I just thought someone left a wallet, and it needed to be returned." He smiled faintly. "That's what I mean. You did the right thing without any ulterior motive. I can't tell you how rare that is." A flush of self-consciousness colored her cheeks. She hadn't expected such earnest gratitude. "I'm just trying to stay true to myself," she murmured. "I'm not perfect, but I can't steal. Even if life might be easier for a moment, it's not who I am." Derek nodded, his gaze serious. For the first time, Samantha noticed the tired lines around his hazel eyes. "People usually assume I have everything because of my position," he admitted. "But the truth is, I feel like I'm missing something. Being surrounded by yes-men and opportunists doesn't exactly fill the soul." His candor surprised her. She sipped her coffee, heart drumming a little harder. Here he was, a CEO with wealth beyond her comprehension, confessing loneliness. The distant clang of plates from behind the cafe's counter punctuated their conversation. They spoke longer than she expected, exchanging pieces of their lives, discovering small but meaningful details that bridged their two worlds. And though Samantha could not see how this connection might alter the course of her everyday struggles, a part of her sensed a subtle shift. Her simple act of honesty had opened a new door, and whatever lay beyond it, she was both nervous and quietly hopeful to find out. A week after her unexpected coffee with Derek Morris, Samantha Hill arrived at the lakeside diner before sunrise. The gentle clink of silverware greeted her as she stepped inside, where the fluorescent lights revealed Sra Evelyn Henderson, the diner's 60-year-old owner, stooped over a stack of receipts in her cramped office. Sra Henderson had invited Samantha in early to chat about something important, and Samantha guessed it had to do with all the buzz around her and Derek. No sooner had Samantha hung her light jacket on the coat hook than Ciara Henderson beckoned her over with a kind but firm wave. "Come in, dear," she said in her steady voice. Her grey hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and her gold-framed glasses glinted as she looked up. The office itself was modest, just an old wooden desk and a few potted plants lining the narrow windowsill. Family photos covered one wall, showing smiling children, grandchildren, and a much younger Ciara Henderson beaming beside them. Samantha settled into the chair across from her boss, pressing her hands against her lap. She could feel her nerves sparking, as if anticipating a reprimand. Word had spread around town about Derek Morris returning for his wallet and personally thanking the honest waitress. Customers and staff alike seemed unable to stop talking about it, and Samantha worried that maybe the extra attention was causing trouble for the diner. "How are you holding up, Ciara?" Henderson asked softly, resting her elbows on the desk. Samantha exhaled. "I'm all right, just feeling strange about all the gossip. People act like returning that wallet was heroic when it was the only thing that made sense." "Rare sense these days, Ciara," Henderson replied. "People don't always do what's right, especially when money's involved. Don't dismiss what you did as trivial. It speaks volumes about your character." Her tone was warm, reminding Samantha of a kindly grandmother ready to dispense wisdom. "I appreciate that, but the sudden attention is overwhelming," Samantha admitted, lowering her gaze to a photo of a smiling Henderson family reunion. "Some folks think I'm expecting a payout or something from Mr. Morris. I'm not. Honestly, we've just spoken a few times since. He seems sincere." Ciara Henderson nodded, leaning back in her chair. "Sometimes, dear, life introduces us to people we never expected in ways we can't predict. You did a good deed, and it caught the eye of someone who might have the power to change your life. Or maybe not. The key is staying true to who you are." Her words struck Samantha with unexpected force. "That's what worries me," she admitted. "I'm not used to wealthy circles. If Derek invites me somewhere that's out of my league, how do I maintain who I am without feeling—" She paused, struggling to find the right word. "Small." A gentle smile lifted Sra Henderson's features. "That feeling of smallness comes from your own insecurities, not from your worth. We have to know our value if we want others to respect it. I came to this country with nothing. Built this diner from scratch alongside my late husband. Folks told me I'd never keep the doors open, but I believed in myself, even when money was tight and the future was murky." Samantha fiddled with the cuff of her uniform. "You make it sound so simple." "I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying that honesty and determination rarely lead us astray. Stand by your morals, be open to new opportunities, and remember sometimes good people come into our lives to remind us why we keep fighting for our dreams." She reached across the desk, patting Samantha's hand. "If Derek Morris wants to thank you personally, let him. It doesn't mean you owe him your soul. It means you shared a moment of genuine decency, and it intrigued him." Her boss's maternal reassurance warmed Samantha's heart. Despite her shaky finances, this conversation made her feel unexpectedly wealthy in spirit. "Thank you, Sarah. Henderson, I needed to hear that." The older woman stood. "Now, let's get the diner ready. These floors won't mop themselves." Samantha rose, grateful for the guidance. She realized that while she might not have a formal mentor in life, Henderson's wisdom was exactly what she needed. As she left the office to begin her shift, Samantha felt a small bud of confidence unfurl within her, a sign that she was indeed ready for whatever twist life handed her next. A few days later, Samantha found herself in front of a modest clothing store in downtown Newark, a place known for its budget-friendly prices. She had a free afternoon, a rarity in her schedule, and Rachel was determined to help her find something nice but not too fancy. Derek Morris had asked to meet her again, this time outside the diner, and Samantha decided she wanted to present herself in a way that felt a notch above her uniform or well-worn jeans. Rachel led the way through racks of blouses and skirts, occasionally holding up items for Samantha to consider. "Try this," she'd say, or "that color would be perfect with your hair." Samantha couldn't help but glance at price tags with unease. Even so-called budget clothes added up quickly, and every dollar spent was a dollar she couldn't put toward rent. Yet a part of her recognized that she needed something presentable. Her old clothes, though clean, were faded, showing every year of her financial struggle. She finally settled on a simple navy dress that hugged her frame without being tight. It had modest sleeves and a knee-length hem. Rachel nodded approvingly. "You look like you mean business," she teased, "but still very you." Samantha blushed, checking herself in the mirror. "Too much. I don't want to pretend I'm somebody I'm not. But I also don't want to look out of place if Derek takes me to I don't know, some fancy restaurant or something." Rachel shrugged, a playful smile on her lips. "Let's just say you'll be ready for anything." Bag in hand, they left the store. The afternoon sun made the sidewalk feel warmer, and the busy hum of city life swirled around them, honking cabs, passers-by chatting on phones, a street vendor selling pretzels. It struck Samantha how many routines she had settled into. Same bus, same diner, same recipes, same small talk with customers. Part of her had come to accept that life would never change. Now, even with a simple clothing purchase, she sensed she was taking steps beyond her comfort zone. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked, strolling beside her. "About meeting Derek again?" "A little," Samantha admitted. "He's just from another world. I mean, I wait tables for a living. He negotiates multi-million-dollar deals. It's hard not to feel intimidated." Rachel bumped her shoulder playfully. "Don't forget who you are, Sam. You're the woman who found a wallet stuffed with cash and gave every cent back. He's the one who wants to meet you." Smiling, Samantha exhaled a bit of tension. "You have a way of putting things in perspective." They decided to stop at a small coffee stand, ordering iced teas to cool off. As they sipped, Samantha's mind wandered to what Ciara Henderson had told her about being true to herself. She recalled how the older woman had once emigrated and worked impossible hours to build the diner from nothing. That perseverance had led to a successful, though humble, business. Something about that story resonated with Samantha now more than ever. If Sray Henderson could learn to thrive in unfamiliar territory, maybe Samantha could learn to handle herself in Derek's orbit without losing her identity. After she and Rachel parted ways, Samantha headed home on a different bus route from usual, a conscious choice to see a bit more of the city. Tall buildings, lively shops, and passing conversations in various accents reminded her that life wasn't as small as she sometimes believed. She clutched the shopping bag containing her new dress on her lap, feeling both excitement and nerves about what lay ahead. Back at her apartment, she hung the dress in her tiny closet, then eyed the rent notice pinned to the fridge. She still had no magic solution for her financial problems. Even so, she felt a shift within herself, a sense that change wasn't inherently bad, nor was it something to fear. She recalled Derek's eyes, weary yet earnest, and how he'd seemed genuinely intrigued by her willingness to do the right thing. As she rested that night, Samantha thought about the next day's plans. She would meet Derek in a public place, presumably for lunch or maybe a walk in the city. This time, she wasn't just the tired waitress in a stained apron. She was Samantha Hill, someone prepared to break from the old routine and see where honesty and an open heart might lead her. When Derek Morris suggested meeting at a cafe near Liberty State Park, Samantha had pictured a cozy spot similar to the diner. Instead, she found herself stepping into a sleek establishment with polished glass doors and pristine white walls. Jazz music played softly in the background, and a line of tastefully arranged pastries adorned the display case. The cafe's airy interior and minimalist decor were a stark contrast to the lakeside diner's neon signs and retro booths. She spotted Derek seated in a corner, reading something on his tablet. He rose as soon as he saw her, greeting her with a friendly, if somewhat reserved, smile. "I hope you don't mind. I come here sometimes for the quiet atmosphere," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. Samantha tried not to fidget in her new navy dress. "It's lovely," she replied, noticing the subtle hum of an espresso machine. "I can see why you like it." He seemed more relaxed than before, wearing a crisp, casual button-down instead of his usual suit jacket. Yet even in this laid-back outfit, his demeanor exuded confidence. Samantha remembered her conversation with Rachel about how different Derek's world might be. Glancing around, she took in the clientele, people tapping away at laptops, sipping lattes in designer cups, discussing business expansions rather than everyday worries like grocery bills. "How have you been?" Derek asked softly, once they'd both ordered coffee. Samantha shrugged, smiling politely. "Still working shifts, trying to manage rent. Nothing too exciting." She paused, then mustered her courage. "And you? You look less stressed today." He let out a wry chuckle, setting his tablet aside. "I'm in between crises at work," he joked, "but it's been enlightening, I guess, thinking about that day I lost my wallet and how it led me here. It made me realize how much I take for granted." Her heart thumped at his openness. "I'm guessing people usually jump at the chance to keep whatever they find," she said carefully. "Someone with your status might be surrounded by folks who see a potential payday." He nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "Exactly. Even close acquaintances occasionally angle for loans or favors. After a while, you start to assume everyone has an angle. Then I meet someone who doesn't want anything, and it throws me off." The directness of his statement caught Samantha off guard. She hesitated, then said quietly, "It wasn't easy to resist. I'm not well off, and I'd be lying if I said the thought didn't cross my mind, but living with that kind of guilt, I'd rather keep my dignity." Derek regarded her with genuine respect, shining in his hazel eyes. "That's the part that fascinates me," he admitted. "Where does someone find the strength to do that, especially when struggling financially?" He quickly added, "Not that I'm prying into your finances, just, it's admirable." A flutter of unease rippled through her. She never liked talking about her bills, her daily scramble to stay afloat. Yet something about Derek's earnest curiosity disarmed her. She toyed with the handle of her coffee cup. "I suppose I value my self-respect more than I do a few $100s, even if it means living paycheck to paycheck. It's just how I was raised." He glanced around the cafe, where stylish patrons glided in and out. "This world," he said, gesturing vaguely, "isn't my whole story either. Sometimes I wonder if I've built walls around me by being in these environments. I miss genuine human connection. It's easy to forget real kindness still exists." She felt a small pang of empathy. The cafe, as polished as it was, felt impersonal compared to the warmth of the diner. "What did you do before you became this big CEO?" she asked, genuinely curious. Derek gave a half-smile. "I started in tech, a small startup with a couple of college friends. We got lucky, made the right moves, and grew. But somewhere along the line, I lost track of who was genuine and who wasn't." Their conversation stretched on, weaving through topics of childhood, small-town memories, and career regrets. Samantha became increasingly aware that Derek was offering her a glimpse of his life behind the polished exterior. As their time together lengthened, she sensed she was stepping into a different realm, one where success didn't necessarily guarantee happiness. And although it felt foreign, she realized there was room in this world for someone like her, provided she stayed true to herself. Over the next few weeks, Samantha found herself exploring corners of the city she'd never visited before, places Derek Morris suggested they meet so they could talk more. Sometimes they strolled through a park she hadn't known existed, feeding ducks by a pond or watching families play soccer. Other times, they'd pop into a small art gallery or a local bakery that Derek had discovered on some business venture. Each outing felt like a gentle invitation for Samantha to step beyond the narrow path of her day-to-day life. She couldn't help feeling a bit like an imposter in these settings. She'd glance around at well-dressed patrons sipping expensive beverages or wander through polished lobbies with modern art sculptures, thinking, "I'm just a diner waitress." But Derek seemed genuinely interested in her perspective, often asking, "What do you think of this place?" or "Have you tried anything like this before?" His curiosity was warm, not condescending. One early evening, they visited a neighborhood community center where Derek occasionally funded after-school programs. The space was modest, with bright posters of inspirational quotes on the walls, a few computers for public use, and shelves crammed with donated books. A group of teenagers practiced basketball in the small gym while volunteers supervised. "This is part of the city I want to help uplift," Derek explained quietly, leading her along a hallway lined with photos. "Some of these kids come from tough backgrounds. It reminds me of how important it is to give people chances." Samantha was touched by the sincerity in his voice. "Do they know who you are?" she asked, noting that none of the staff seemed fazed by him walking around. He shrugged. "I prefer to stay low profile here. I just show up as Derek. No flashy suits or big speeches. We donate funds to keep the programs going, and I try to pop in when I can, see what they need." She paused at a bulletin board pinned with drawings and short stories submitted by local students. "It's nice," she murmured. "I never realized how invested you were in these causes." Something like relief flickered in his expression. "I have to do something with the resources I have," he said. "Otherwise, what's the point of all this wealth?" Their conversation continued as they roamed the building, greeting a couple of volunteers who recognized Derek with friendly waves. Samantha asked questions about the children's reading programs and how donations were used. The more she learned, the more she appreciated the layers beneath Derek's outwardly polished demeanor. He was not, as she'd initially assumed, another distant CEO with a penchant for fancy dinners alone. Later, they stepped outside into the warm twilight. Cars zipped down the adjacent street, and city lights flickered on. Samantha leaned against the center's brick wall, arms folded. "You know," she said carefully, "I've spent my life worried about basic survival, but seeing you handle big responsibilities like these programs, it's amazing. I had no idea people in your position cared so personally." Derek lowered his gaze, almost bashful. "I haven't always been this engaged. In the early years, I was too focused on growth and profit. It took failures and meeting people who reminded me of what matters to push me into giving back." She gave him a thoughtful nod, feeling a surge of admiration. Well, from where I stand, it matters a lot. They parted with a promise to meet again soon, leaving Samantha with a swirl of emotions. On the bus ride home, she cradled her phone, smiling as she revisited their conversation. A memory flitted through her mind. How tempted she'd once been to keep just one bill from his wallet. If she had done that, she would never have glimpsed this side of his world. Despite the excitement, she faced challenges. Rumors swirled at the diner, Chris's jokes about the millionaire boyfriend, fellow waitresses speculating about how Samantha might be using him. She tried to shrug it off, but their words stung, feeding her own insecurities about not belonging in Derek's circles. Still, each new encounter made her more determined to adapt without losing herself. She reminded herself that Derek saw her for more than a uniform. If she stayed honest about her fears and needs, maybe this connection, whatever it was turning into, could be real. Day by day, she learned to navigate this unfamiliar territory, mindful that her own authenticity was the key to thriving there. When Derek suggested Samantha meet two of his closest friends, Michelle and Henry Johnson, she braced herself for intimidating socialites wrapped in designer clothes. Instead, she found a down-to-earth couple who greeted her at their front door with laughter and open arms. Michelle, 42, had a warm, round face framed by short curls, and Henry, 45, carried a slight paunch but had a friendly grin that put Samantha at ease immediately. Their home in suburban New Jersey was spacious compared to her small apartment, yet it exuded a cozy charm. Photos of their family vacations lined the walls, and the living room smelled faintly of cinnamon. Samantha noticed a piano in the corner and a few children's drawings tacked to the fridge, revealing they had kids of their own, though she didn't see them tonight. Henry offered her a seat on the comfy sofa, while Michelle disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with a platter of snacks. "Derek told us quite a bit about you," Michelle began warmly, settling down in an armchair. "We're glad to finally meet the woman who reminded him that people can be genuinely good." Samantha lowered her gaze, cheeks warming. "I'm not sure I deserve all that praise, but it's nice to meet friends he actually trusts." Michelle exchanged a glance with Henry. "We all go way back," Henry said, crossing his arms comfortably. "Derek and I roomed together in college. Michelle came along later. We've stayed close through the years. Though it's harder now, what with Derek's schedule and people constantly wanting things from him." Derek, who was seated beside Samantha, gave a small sigh. "That's why I appreciate you two. You never asked me for anything other than friendship." He turned to Samantha. "They also do a lot of philanthropic work, helping me figure out the best places to allocate donations." The conversation flowed easily after that, with Henry recounting some amusing college stories about Derek, who pretended to protest but clearly enjoyed the banter. Michelle offered anecdotes about past charity events where they'd had to navigate red tape and suspicious beneficiaries, emphasizing that sincerity was tough to find in a world driven by profit margins. Samantha listened intently, occasionally chiming in with her own experiences at the diner, small fundraising efforts she'd seen happen in the community or local events for families in need. She found that, despite the difference in their lifestyles, she shared values with Derek's friends, a belief in kindness, empathy, and the power of community support. At one point, Michelle leaned forward, curiosity shining in her eyes. "I understand that you've been through some scrutiny lately. Must be rough having people at your workplace gossip." "It is," Samantha admitted, shifting on the sofa. "I don't want them thinking I'm out for a handout or using Derek's name." "But that's exactly what some are saying." Michelle gave a sympathetic look. "I've been there, though in different ways. People can be quick to judge. The best approach is to be steadfast in who you are. The truth usually wins out." Henry nodded in agreement. We can't control other people's assumptions, but from what Derek told us, you're a woman of integrity. That tends to stand the test of time. Warmth spread through Samantha's chest. These two were so genuine, so down to earth, she felt a kinship blossoming. Derek's world wasn't just boardrooms and high-stakes deals. It included folks like Michelle and Henry, who seemed more like the kind-hearted neighbors she might have grown up with. By the end of the evening, Samantha was laughing along with them, sharing her own humorous stories about mishaps at the diner, like the time she spilled an entire pot of coffee near a retired policeman who fortunately had a good sense of humor. Their easy camaraderie made her see that not everyone in Derek's life lived by glitz or greed. Some, like Michelle and Henry, were driven by compassion and authenticity. As they said their goodbyes, Michelle squeezed Samantha's hand. Don't hesitate to call if you need anything, advice, a venting session, whatever. We're here. Samantha left feeling oddly light, as if she'd gained allies she never knew she needed. It dawned on her that this path, once so foreign, might lead to friendships and connections more meaningful than she'd dared to imagine. Not every encounter in Derek's world was so welcoming. The first time Samantha crossed paths with Robert Harris, she sensed a chill before he spoke a single word. It was at a high-rise office building where Derek had asked Samantha to stop by. They were planning to review some marketing materials for a charity event he wanted to support. She stepped into the sleek lobby, marbled floors reflecting the soft glow of recessed lighting, and waited for Derek to finish a meeting upstairs. A tall, broad-shouldered man, about 50 years old, approached her. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and carried a leather briefcase. His salt and pepper hair gave him an air of sophistication, but his piercing gaze unsettled her. "You must be Samantha," he said coolly, eyeing her from head to toe. Robert Harris. He didn't extend a hand in greeting, merely stared. Uncertain, she offered a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Harris. Derek mentioned your name once or twice." She couldn't recall Derek's exact words, but she did remember a note of caution whenever Robert came up. His posture was stiff as he glanced around the lobby. "I understand you and Derek have been spending time together." His tone suggested he found that idea puzzling, maybe even distasteful. Samantha tried to keep her voice steady. "Yes, we've talked about some community projects he's involved in. I'm learning a lot." A slight curl appeared at the corner of Robert's mouth. "He has a penchant for championing lost causes," he murmured, not bothering to hide the disdain. "So, how exactly do you fit into his life?" His eyes bore into hers, challenging her presence. She felt her cheeks flush. "I'm just a friend," she said firmly, "and I returned his wallet when he left it at the diner. That's all." "Is it?" he pressed, stepping closer. "I've known Derek for years. People like you see a wealthy man and think they've struck gold. It's not the first time I've watched him befriend someone who—" He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Anger flared within Samantha. She squared her shoulders. "Excuse me, Mr. Harris, but I'm not people like me. I'm a person who found a wallet and gave it back. If I wanted gold, as you say, I could have taken his money and disappeared." He regarded her silently for a moment, face expressionless. "Yet here you are, in his building, attending his meetings." His voice dripped with skepticism. "If you think you can take advantage of Derek's generosity, you'll find me standing in your way." A tremor ran through her stomach, a mixture of rage and anxiety. "I'm not taking advantage of anything. If Derek wants me here, that's between him and me." Robert exhaled sharply. "Let's hope you remember your place. Derek's under enough pressure without a waitress from who knows where stirring up trouble. I trust you won't be a distraction." Before she could reply, Derek's voice echoed from behind a glass partition. "Robert, there you are." He stepped over, smiling at Samantha, then glancing at Robert with a polite nod. "I see you've met Sam." Samantha forced a tight smile, her heart still pounding. Robert's expression changed in an instant, colder, if that was possible. "Yes, we were just getting acquainted," he said, the edge in his tone barely concealed. Derek, oblivious to the tension, gestured for Samantha to follow him upstairs. "We're all set." His eyes darted between them, catching a hint of the strained atmosphere. "Everything all right?" Robert offered a thin-lipped smile. "Fine. I have another meeting." He turned on his heel and strode off without so much as a goodbye. Samantha's shoulders sagged the moment he left. Derek reached for her arm gently, concern creasing his brow. "What did he say to you?" She inhaled, willing her racing pulse to slow. "Nothing I can't handle," she replied, though she already sensed this man would become a significant obstacle. "Let's just get out of here." Heading to the elevator, Samantha felt Robert's words lingering in her mind. She realized that, in Derek's corporate realm, not everyone was as open-hearted as Michelle and Henry. Robert Harris represented a threat to both Derek's peace and Samantha's sense of belonging, and from the look in his eyes, he wasn't about to let her forget it. It started with a simple question from a customer at the Lakeside Diner. "So, Samantha," asked a grey-haired man, nursing his second cup of coffee, "any updates on that fancy CEO you helped out?" At first, she smiled politely and gave a neutral reply, but the small exchange hinted at the wave of curiosity washing through the community. Word had spread far beyond the diner staff. Locals had begun to whisper about Samantha Hill, the waitress rumored to be dating a millionaire. Her days became a series of small tests. Some customers cornered her, demanding to know how she managed to land such a catch. Others suggested she was hunting for a quick payday, their skepticism thinly veiled. Meanwhile, a handful of new patrons showed up, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or glean juicy details. The diner's tips improved slightly from the extra traffic, but Samantha felt far from grateful. She dreaded every prying question and sideways glance. Chris, her co-worker who'd been cynical from the start, saw an opportunity to stir the pot. One slow afternoon, while wiping down tables, he sidled up to Samantha. "Heard from Prince Charming lately." His tone was playful, yet edged with malice. "Bet he's showering you with gifts by now. Maybe you could toss a few my way." He laughed at his own barb, leaving Samantha bristling. "I'm not looking for gifts," she snapped softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have a job. I pay my bills barely, but I do it honestly." Yeah, Chris drawled, eyes rolling. "Just don't forget us little people when you're jet-setting around in private planes." His words echoed louder than she cared to admit. A swirl of anxiety sank into her chest. Samantha took pride in her integrity, but she began to wonder if she was naive. Was she fighting a losing battle, sticking so fiercely to the moral high road? Each jibe or rumor gnawed at her composure, forcing her to defend not only her relationship with Derek, but also her fundamental character. Outside the diner, the tests continued. A local reporter from a small online blog started trailing her off and on, snapping pictures through the window while she worked. One evening, he approached her as she left, thrusting a microphone forward. "Any comment on how it feels to be a modern Cinderella?" he asked. She ducked away, refusing to engage, her cheeks burning. Rachel tried to boost Samantha's spirits, stepping in whenever gossip flared among the staff. "She's the same person she's always been," Rachel would say firmly, shooting a warning glare at Chris or anyone else snickering. "Give her some respect." Samantha's manager, Mike Roberts, noticed the strain too. One morning, he found her in the break area, hands shaking as she clutched a cup of lukewarm coffee. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "I'm tired," she confessed, eyes reflecting her mental fatigue. "It's like every day there's a new rumor." Mike patted her shoulder, his face a mask of understanding. Hang in there. People will get bored eventually. Just keep being you. His words offered a sliver of comfort. Still, Samantha realized that no matter how often she proved her sincerity, suspicions would remain. The experience forced her to weigh each interaction. Could she trust this person? Were they fishing for sensational details? Each new test seemed to confirm that staying true to her values had a cost, especially when the world around her craved scandal or spectacle. Derek, too, felt the mounting tension. He'd occasionally drop by the diner for lunch, discreet in jeans and a ball cap, but rumors flew faster after every visit. He apologized again and again for the hassle, though Samantha insisted it wasn't his fault. "You can't control what people think," she reminded him. "We just have to do what feels right." But doing what felt right in a climate of suspicion and gossip was no small task. Even so, Samantha refused to sink to the level of name-calling or cynicism. Each day, she brushed off new challenges like dust from her apron, resolving to remain the same honest person she'd always been, even if eyes were watching her from every corner, waiting for a single misstep. Late one evening, Samantha sank onto her threadbare couch, her mind replaying the day's barrage of probing questions and critical stares. Outside her window, the streets were mostly quiet, save for the rumble of a distant car. The comfort of home should have soothed her, but restless energy prickled under her skin. She turned off the TV, deciding she didn't need more noise. Instead, she stared at the muted glow of her living room lamp, thoughts drifting to places she'd tried to keep buried. The feeling of exhaustion mingled with a dull ache of memory. She began recalling a past relationship, 2 years ago, with a man named Jordan. Back then, she had no illusions of grandeur, but she thought they could build a life together. He'd insisted she wasn't ambitious enough, telling her that waiting tables wouldn't cut it in the future he envisioned. Those words had stung more than she'd let on. Eventually, their differences became insurmountable, and he left. Now, she found herself facing a strange parallel. With Derek, she worried about the exact opposite, that she wasn't polished or sophisticated enough for his life. Deep down, she feared losing herself in his world or being cast aside once he realized how plain she was in comparison to the glossy social circles he sometimes moved in. A tremor of anger surfaced. Wasn't she the same Samantha who believed in doing right, who'd never considered climbing on someone else's success to fix her problems? Still, she couldn't deny how much easier it would be if she just accepted Derek's offers of help, like taking a small loan for rent or letting him pay for some nicer clothes. The fact that she refused these gestures made the rumors sting more. Some people accused her of playing coy, fishing for a bigger payoff. Others implied she was foolish for not taking advantage of her lucky break. Unable to sit still any longer, Samantha retrieved an old notebook from her kitchen drawer. It served as a makeshift journal, a place to scribble her thoughts when they threatened to overwhelm her. She flipped to a blank page and stared at it, pen poised. Her mind churned with questions. Am I good enough? Is honesty worth the cost? Will I ever move beyond mere survival? The memory of Jordan's criticisms blended with the new self-doubts swirling around Derek. A lump rose in her throat as she wrote a few words. I fear I'll never be seen as more than a waitress with a moral code. She pressed the pen harder, forming thick, angry letters, yet a small part of her rebelled against that notion. She might be a waitress, but she was also compassionate, hard-working, and yes, stubbornly honest. Lost in thought, she jumped when her phone chimed. It was a text from Rachel, checking in on her. You okay? I know it's been rough. Remember, you're not alone. The simple message loosened the knots in Samantha's chest. She typed a quick reply of thanks, feeling a surge of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. She also found herself scrolling through unanswered messages from Derek. They'd talked earlier about the rumors, how best to handle them. He was sympathetic, offering to release some public statement if it would help. She politely declined, not wanting to escalate the situation. Yet part of her yearned to open up further about her fears. Would it scare him off if he saw just how tangled my insecurities are? She decided to postpone that conversation, the night feeling too raw. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, letting the flicker of streetlights calm her. "This is a test," she reminded herself, as Esara Henderson had once said. If Samantha could walk through the pain of public judgment and her own unresolved fears, maybe she'd finally believe in her own worth. Before bed, she scribbled one last line in her notebook. "I choose honesty, even if it hurts." Then she closed it firmly, switching off the lamp. Darkness enveloped her tiny apartment, but in that quiet, she held on to the faint hope that tomorrow might bring clarity, or at least the strength to keep going. The next morning dawned grey and cool, matching Samantha's heavy mood. She arrived at the diner, carrying the weight of her struggles like a backpack full of stones. Within minutes of her entering, Mike pulled her aside, concern in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, bracing herself for bad news. "You've got a phone call," he said, motioning toward the office in the back. "Says he's a journalist looking to interview you. I told him to call later, but he's persistent." Samantha's stomach dropped. The last thing she wanted was another pushy reporter. She shook her head. "I'm not talking to any press right now." Mike let out a sigh, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I'll handle it. Just be careful, Sam. Seems they're not letting this story fade." She nodded, but dread curled in her gut. This kind of intrusion felt like a barricade rising around her, one she couldn't see a way around. Taking a shaky breath, she returned to the dining area. Almost immediately, she recognized a few unfamiliar faces glancing her way, their phones angled suspiciously. It was as if every move she made had become a spectacle. Her day only worsened. One of the regular customers, a friendly middle-aged woman named Carla, approached Samantha with a magazine in hand. "Have you seen this?" she whispered, flipping to a page near the back. There it was, a small article claiming Samantha Hill was cozying up to a wealthy businessman and might be angling for a payout. The piece included a blurry photo taken from across the street, presumably near Derek's building. Samantha's chest constricted. "Thanks for letting me know," she managed, forcing a grateful nod. Inside, humiliation welled up like hot tears threatening to spill. By the time afternoon rolled around, she felt trapped. Every direction she turned, it seemed someone had an opinion or a question. Even a few of her loyal customers acted awkward, unsure if they should congratulate her or pity her. With every forced smile and every polite refusal to comment, Samantha felt the walls closing in. More than once, she wondered if it would be better for Derek if she just walked away. Mid-shift, she finally retreated to the back alley behind the diner, leaning against the cool brick wall with her eyes squeezed shut. She inhaled deeply to steady her racing heart. Is this worth it? The question thundered through her mind. She thought of Derek's gentle concern, the sincerity in his eyes whenever she expressed discomfort. But she also pictured Robert Harris's cold stare, the prying cameras, the ugly rumors. Suddenly, the alley door opened. Rachel slipped out, worry lining her face. "Sam," she said quietly, stepping closer. "You okay?" Samantha let out a shaky laugh. "No, not really. I feel like a circus act. Everywhere I go, people ask about me and Derek, or they assume I'm a gold digger." She kicked a small pebble at her feet. "What if I'm dragging him down? He has an image to protect, and I'm not exactly—" "Stop right there," Rachel cut in, resting a hand on Samantha's arm. "You're not hurting him. Derek's a grown man. He knows what he's doing, and he obviously values your company or he wouldn't keep reaching out." Tears stung the corners of Samantha's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Sometimes it feels like these walls are too high, like no matter what I do, the world is stacked against me." Rachel squeezed gently. "I can't pretend to know how you feel, but I do know you have more strength than you give yourself credit for. You've proven that time and time again." A surge of emotion welled up in Samantha's chest. Gratitude, fear, anger. She realized then that the only way through these seemingly insurmountable walls was to keep living her truth, no matter how suffocating it felt. But in that moment, she wasn't entirely sure if her truth would be strong enough. They stood together in the alley for a few more seconds. Then Samantha wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and re-entered the diner. She didn't have the answers yet, but she would face whatever came next with as much courage as she could muster. Because surrender, she decided, simply wasn't an option. At home that night, Samantha found herself scrolling through local news sites on her phone, hoping to gauge the media's temperature. Most of what she read was repetitive gossip, nothing truly damning or new. Then she stumbled upon an editorial in a reputable local newspaper, headlined, "Honesty in a Cynical World, the Waitress Who Returned a Fortune." The piece was thoughtful, detailing Samantha's act of integrity while questioning why society found such behavior remarkable. A spark flickered in her chest. Here was a writer who seemed genuinely curious about the deeper meaning behind her actions, not just the potential romance with Derek. She took a screenshot of the article, feeling oddly comforted by its balanced viewpoint. The next day, around lunchtime, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated, but curiosity won out. "Hello." "Hi, Samantha. This is Sarah Mitchell from the Bayview Daily. I wrote the editorial about your story." The voice was calm and warm, reminiscent of a teacher or a librarian. Samantha's heart fluttered. "Oh, I read it. Thank you. It was nice to see someone focusing on the bigger picture." Sarah chuckled softly. "I'm glad you appreciated it. Listen, I was wondering if you'd be open to a more in-depth interview. No tabloid stuff. Just a chance to share your perspective. I think people might want to hear from you directly, in your own words." Her immediate reaction was to decline. She'd been burned by the press, cornered by paparazzi and opportunistic bloggers. Yet something about Sarah's approach felt different. Samantha glanced at the diner's clock, noticing she had a small window before her shift ramped up. "Could we do it later?" "In person," Sarah agreed readily, suggesting they meet that evening at a quiet coffee shop near Samantha's apartment. Part of Samantha was terrified, but another part longed to set the record straight on her terms. When she arrived at the cafe after her shift, the day's last sunlight filtered through large windows, painting the space in a gentle orange glow. Sarah was easy to spot. Early 30s, curly brown hair pulled back neatly, a notebook and recorder in front of her. Her smile radiated genuine kindness. Once they sat, Samantha took a deep breath. "I'm nervous," she confessed. Sarah nodded sympathetically. "I understand. Let's just talk, and if there's anything you don't want published, say so." They started with simple questions: how Samantha ended up at the lakeside diner, what her upbringing was like, her general view on honesty. Sarah's tone remained respectful throughout, refraining from prying about Derek's personal details. "You returned a wallet full of money at a time when your own finances were tight. That's admirable. Were you ever tempted to take just a little?" Samantha bit her lip. "Yes," she admitted. "I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about my rent, but I knew I couldn't live with myself if I did that. Money comes and goes. My conscience, that's with me forever." Sarah beamed as she jotted notes. "That's exactly the human side I want readers to see." Feeling braver, Samantha explained the toll rumors had taken on her life. how she'd been labeled everything from a saint to a schemer. She also expressed her frustration at how society seemed both enthralled and suspicious of a single act of honesty. By the time their coffees were half finished, Samantha felt lighter, as if sharing her story with someone who truly listened had chipped away at the negativity pressing on her. "Thank you for giving me this space," she said, voice tinged with relief. Sarah's eyes gleamed. "Honesty is rare, but it shouldn't be. Maybe reading your words will remind folks that doing the right thing isn't some extraordinary feat. It's how things should be." The interview ended on a note of mutual respect. Later that week, the article ran in the Bayview Daily, painting Samantha as a grounded, moral individual thrust into an unexpected spotlight. The piece was widely shared on social media, where many lauded her choices rather than questioning them. Though some critics inevitably chimed in, a swell of supportive voices seemed to overshadow them. For Samantha, it felt like a small but significant victory, one that reaffirmed her belief in the power of truth, even amid a sea of doubt. And as she read the final paragraphs of the article, tears welled up in her eyes. This was her voice, untainted by scandal or speculation, reminding everyone that not all that glitters is gold, and sometimes the simplest virtue can shine brighter than any fortune. The positive response to Sarah's article gave Samantha a brief respite from the relentless scrutiny. At the diner, a few customers congratulated her on the interview, remarking how refreshing it was to hear sincerity in an age of cynicism. Even Chris toned down his snark, although he still grumbled about overblown hero worship whenever he thought no one was listening. Meanwhile, Derek read the piece with a quiet pride, telling Samantha he appreciated her willingness to speak so openly about her challenges. They hadn't seen each other in days, both consumed by work and personal obligations, but they traded reassuring texts that maintained a sense of closeness. One evening, Derek called unexpectedly. His voice crackled over the line, tense but determined. "Sam, I need to talk to you about something." "Important." He sounded almost breathless. "Could we meet at my place tonight? I'd come to you, but there's a lot going on at the office." Samantha agreed, heart thumping. She'd only been to Derek's apartment once, to drop off some documents he'd forgotten. It was a sleek penthouse near the waterfront, all glass windows and modern design. She still felt out of place in such opulence. But she reminded herself that Derek wasn't defined by his surroundings. After work, she slipped on her cleanest blouse and a pair of jeans that weren't too faded, then caught the bus. Upon arriving, the doorman recognized her, offering a polite nod as he let her in. A swift elevator ride later, she stepped into Derek's living room, where city lights sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows. Derek was waiting by the kitchen island, wearing casual slacks and an unbuttoned collared shirt. The stress lines on his face had grown more pronounced since their last in-person meeting, yet a small smile tugged at his lips when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said, ushering her in. "Can I get you anything?" She asked for water, too nervous for anything stronger. Once they settled on the sleek grey couch, Derek exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. "Robert Harris is pushing the board to question my leadership," he began, voice laced with frustration. "He's using this swirl of rumors about us as evidence I'm distracted." Samantha's stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to cause trouble. It's not your fault," he assured, placing a gentle hand on hers. "Robert's been looking for a reason to undermine me for months. Your honesty just made me realize how little honesty there is in my own company." She studied his face, sensing his exhaustion. "So what happens next?" Derek swallowed. "He's calling for an internal review meeting, possibly an assembly of major shareholders. I'll have to defend my decisions as CEO, show them the direction I intend to take. Part of me wants to throw in the towel," Step away from the politics and focus on something more meaningful, like the community programs. But if I walk away, Robert takes over, and that would be bad for a lot of employees who rely on me. Samantha found her voice. You can't let him push you out. You care too much about the people under you. He nodded, eyes dark. Exactly. But it's going to get messy. He'll try to drag you into it, paint our relationship as some scandal or question your motives. Are you ready for that? A wave of dread twisted in her gut. I don't know. But I do know I don't want to run. If you're staying to fight, I want to stand by you. The words surprised her as they left her mouth, but she felt an undeniable surge of conviction. Relief flickered in Derek's eyes. Thank you. He paused, voice thickening slightly. It means more than I can say. They spent the next hour brainstorming. Derek had loyal allies on the board, like Michelle and Henry, who could vouch for his leadership. Samantha suggested being fully transparent if the media pressed for details. We don't have anything to hide, she reasoned. We're not scamming anyone. By the time she left, they had formed a tentative plan, an outline of how Derek might counter Robert's maneuvers and how Samantha might handle any questioning. More importantly, they'd reaffirmed that the connection between them was built on genuine respect, not some opportunistic fling. Standing at his front door, Samantha gazed at Derek, a strange mixture of fear and excitement swirling inside her. They were about to face a bigger storm than any rumor mill or tabloid piece. Yet as he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, she felt a steady warmth grounding her. They would face whatever came next, side by side, prepared, if not perfectly, at least with honest hearts and the will to fight for what mattered most. 2 weeks later, the day of the crucial board meeting arrived with a tense hush in the air. Samantha rode up the elevator of Derek's company headquarters, feeling her pulse throb in her temples, dressed in a simple, well-fitted blouse and skirt, clothes she had carefully chosen to appear presentable yet true to herself. She tried to steady her breathing. Derek stood beside her, posture stiff beneath his tailored suit. A security guard had escorted them to a private floor, ensuring no intrusive reporters invaded the space. Before the elevator doors slid open, Derek glanced at her with gratitude and concern. "Remember," he whispered, "we just need to show we're transparent. They'll see Robert's accusations for what they are." Samantha managed a small nod, her stomach churning at the sight of her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. "Got it," she murmured, though her nerves buzzed like live wires. She reminded herself that they were here to protect something bigger than just their reputations, the livelihoods of employees who counted on Derek's leadership, plus the core values he wanted to uphold in the company. The corridor was hushed, lined with modern art. They stepped into a glass-walled conference room where a dozen board members sat around a long table. Robert Harris stood near the front, arms folded across his broad chest, his expression unreadable. Michelle and Henry, seated close to each other, offered Derek and Samantha reassuring nods as they entered. Samantha could practically feel the tension crackling in the air. "Let's call this meeting to order," announced an older board member, tapping a pen on the table. "We're gathered to address concerns raised by Mr. Harris regarding Derek Morris's leadership and potential conflicts of interest." Robert cleared his throat, projecting confidence. "Thank you. Over the past few months, Derek's decisions have grown erratic. He's been distracted by personal matters. Specifically, he's spending more time on philanthropic projects and personal relationships than on corporate responsibilities." His gaze flicked to Samantha, momentarily cold. Derek inhaled sharply. "I believe in balancing corporate growth with social responsibility. These so-called distractions are initiatives that improve our public image and help the communities we serve." "Indeed," Michelle interjected, her voice calm but firm. As a long-time board member, I've seen Derek's focus on ethical initiatives boost employee morale and brand reputation. Our profit margins remain strong. Robert forced a thin smile. But the real question is whether Derek's judgment has been compromised by... He paused, motioning towards Samantha as though she were an exhibit. By his personal involvement with someone who could be taking advantage of his position. A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Samantha felt a flush creep up her neck. She knew she had to speak for herself. She rose slightly, hands trembling despite her resolve. I understand the rumors, she began, voice quivering at first. I won't pretend I'm anyone special in the corporate world, but I'm here because I returned a wallet. I'm not seeking favors. I work at a diner. I live month to month, and I'd never want Derek to jeopardize his career for me. She paused, steadying her breathing. He's dedicated to this company. Anyone who claims otherwise is ignoring how much effort he puts in behind the scenes. All I've seen from him is honesty and a desire to make a positive impact on the world, and that seems like the exact kind of leadership a modern company should want. A flicker of something crossed Robert's face. Perhaps he was surprised that Samantha spoke so confidently, or maybe he was dismayed she didn't match his narrative of a meek opportunist. Nevertheless, he pressed on, producing a folder of documents. Let's not forget the questionable press coverage. All this talk of a modern Cinderella and interviews that mention Derek's name, potentially damaging our public image if the relationship ends poorly. Henry leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Public image matters, Robert, but so does moral integrity. If anything, the coverage has showcased Derek as a leader who values honesty. Clients and potential partners might respect that. Robert offered a clipped laugh. Respect for a sentimental CEO? Forgive me if I'm not convinced. The conversation escalated, with board members volleying questions at Derek and Robert in turn. Some sided with Robert's pragmatic approach, profits above all, while others recognized Derek's broader vision. Samantha answered politely when asked to clarify her background, ignoring Robert's thinly veiled jabs. It felt like a courtroom, each side struggling to tilt the scales. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of heated discussion, the lead board member called for a break. As people shuffled out to stretch their legs, Samantha caught Derek's eye. He looked both exhausted and determined. She squeezed his hand under the table, whispering, "We'll get through this." He nodded, expression resolute. Outside the conference room windows, the city sprawled beneath an overcast sky. Samantha gazed at the view, aware that the final showdown was far from over, yet she felt a spark of resilience ignite inside her. She wasn't here to put on a show. She was here to defend the honest bond she and Derek had formed, and the principle that a corporation could thrive on integrity just as much as ambition. By the end of that intense meeting, Derek and Samantha emerged emotionally drained. They navigated the hushed corridors side by side, aware that the board had not yet made a final decision. An official vote would come soon, determining Derek's fate as CEO, and by extension, the company's moral direction. Samantha clutched her purse, trying not to tremble as they rode the elevator down in silence. Outside, the late afternoon sky threatened rain. A brisk wind whipped Samantha's hair across her face. Derek guided her toward a small courtyard near the building's entrance, where a cluster of potted trees offered a sliver of privacy. They sank onto a wooden bench, the sound of city traffic rumbling in the distance. He closed his eyes, pressing his thumb and forefinger to his temples. I keep replaying the arguments in my head. Did I say enough? Did I let Robert corner me on any point? His voice cracked with stress. Samantha's heart clenched. You did your best, she reassured softly, resting a hand on his back. We both did. It's out of our hands now. A moment of silence passed, broken only by a passing taxi horn. Derek exhaled slowly, shoulders slumping. I hate feeling powerless. But no matter how things end up, I'm glad you were there. She offered a small smile, though tears burned behind her eyes. Thanks for letting me speak. I was terrified, but I had to set the record straight. He reached for her hand, weaving his fingers through hers. I'm sorry you even had to defend yourself like that. It's not fair. She shook her head, a lump forming in her throat. Not fair. But sometimes that's life. I just hope the board sees Robert's angle for what it is. Her voice wavered. If Derek lost his position, he might lose the platform to support those community programs, not to mention the staff who respected his leadership. They lingered on the bench, letting the tension slowly settle. As the sky darkened, Samantha noticed her phone lighting up with messages. Rachel, Mike, even Michelle offering words of support, but she felt numb, half present. She couldn't stop recalling the intensity of Robert's accusations, the chilling precision in his tone when he tried to undermine Derek's character. Eventually, Derek suggested they get dinner, hoping to restore some normalcy. They chose a small, family-run Italian restaurant a few blocks away, avoiding the fancy spots that might attract more attention. Samantha felt her nerves fade slightly as they sank into a cozy booth. The place smelled of tomato sauce and fresh bread, its soft lighting gentler than the fluorescent glare of corporate hallways. Yet even as their plates arrived, pasta piled high, she noticed Derek barely touched his meal. He twirled strands of spaghetti around his fork, deep in thought. Samantha herself managed only a few bites. After the confrontation, both carried invisible bruises. Remember what you told me, she ventured quietly. Honesty is all you can give. If the board can't value that, maybe it's not the right environment for you, Derek frowned, meeting her gaze. I just don't want Robert punishing everyone else if he takes over. The company could shift to ruthless tactics, layoffs, cutting charitable funds. It's not just about me. She recognized his sense of responsibility, the weight on his shoulders. I know. We'll do everything in our power to keep him from getting control. They paid the bill, stepping back onto the sidewalk just as the clouds released a gentle drizzle. With no umbrellas, they walked briskly, hair and clothes dampening. But something about the soft rainfall felt cleansing, washing away a layer of tension. Reaching Derek's car, they paused under a street lamp, rain glistening on their jackets. Let me drive you home, Derek offered. Samantha nodded, exhaustion evident in her every movement. The ride was quiet, accompanied by the faint slap of windshield wipers. Outside, traffic lights blurred in the watery glow of the downpour. She stared out the window, her reflection tinted by neon signs passing by, thoughts swirling around the potential fallout if Robert won. When they reached her apartment, Derek parked and walked her to the front stoop, ignoring the fact that his suit was getting soaked. Under that small awning, she turned to face him, tears threatening again. It doesn't feel like we won anything today? He brushed a strand of damp hair from her cheek. Not yet, maybe, but we still have our honesty, our convictions. A faint smile tugged at his lips. That counts for something, right? She placed her hand gently against his chest, heart clenched in conflicting emotions. It does, she whispered, forcing a note of conviction into her voice. And we'll hold on to that, no matter what happens next. In the days following the tense meeting, Samantha discovered a new kind of clarity within herself. She returned to her usual shift at the lakeside diner with an unspoken resolve. Stepping through the swinging doors, she felt a peculiar calm settle over her, like she finally understood what she stood for, even if the world around her was in turmoil. She greeted customers warmly, took orders, and delivered plates as always. But something had changed inside her. For the first time, the stares and questions that once rattled her felt less threatening. Some patrons were still curious about Derek, but she refused to let their interest define her. Her sense of self had solidified into a quiet confidence. Rachel noticed it right away, catching Samantha at the coffee station between orders. "You're different today," she observed, arching an eyebrow. "Not that you were ever meek, but there's a spark in you now." Samantha shrugged, smiling. "I've decided I don't need to prove my worth to anyone who doubts it. Derek and I have a real connection, and I can't keep letting other people's opinions tear me down." Rachel grinned broadly, patting her friend's shoulder. "About time you realized that. You look good in that glow of yours." Even Chris, the once cynical co-worker, eyed her with respect. He didn't exactly apologize for his past remarks, but his tone softened when he joked around. The tension that had wound so tightly in Samantha's chest loosened incrementally, replaced by the certainty of her own boundaries and values. On her break, she stepped outside for a quick breath of fresh air, sipping a soda and gazing at the bustle of midday traffic. The memory of Robert's accusations still pricked at her mind, how he'd stood in front of the board, threatening Derek's position. Yet Samantha no longer felt paralyzed by fear. She realized she had a choice: either succumb to the anxiety or channel it into something constructive. Later that afternoon, she picked up her phone to check messages. Derek had sent a quick update. "No final decision yet, but I'm pushing back hard on Robert's proposals. Keep that spirit alive." She smiled, texting back a short reply of support. Then she made another decision, one she'd been contemplating for a while. She phoned a local community center, the same place Derek had shown her weeks ago, to ask if they needed volunteer help. The director sounded thrilled, explaining they were understaffed for an upcoming literacy workshop. Samantha's heart thumped with a surge of excitement. This could be a way to channel her desire to do more, to step beyond her comfort zone in a meaningful way. That evening, after her shift, she headed to the community center. The building buzzed with activity, kids running through hallways, volunteers setting up folding tables. She located the director, a kind-faced woman named Evelyn, no relation to her diner boss, who introduced her to a group of volunteers. "We're helping kids improve reading skills and confidence," Evelyn explained. "It's nothing fancy, but it makes a difference." Samantha grinned, rolling up her sleeves. "I'm not a certified teacher, but I can read with them, offer encouragement, help where needed." She spent 2 hours guiding a handful of elementary-age kids through storybooks, sounding out words and celebrating small victories. Despite her initial nerves, she felt a sense of purpose settle over her. Watching their faces light up when they grasped a new word fed her soul in a way she hadn't expected. Driving home, Samantha realized she was carving out a new identity, not just the waitress who returned a wallet or the girl rumored to be dating a millionaire, but someone who stood on her own merits, offering kindness to those who needed it. She was harnessing the very trait that led her to return Derek's wallet in the first place, her unwavering belief in doing right by people. Yes, life was still uncertain. Robert's power play loomed, and the media might rekindle rumors at any moment. But as Samantha pulled into her apartment parking lot, she felt a warmth radiating inside her, a certainty she had rarely known before. She was more than the sum of her flaws or her financial worries. In embracing her honest heart, she was, in many ways, being reborn as a woman who not only survived, but also sparked change in the world around her. A quiet optimism replaced Samantha's previous anxiety. Derek had kept her informed of small developments within the company, support from unexpected quarters, questions about Robert's leadership methods. Meanwhile, Samantha found herself collaborating more with Michelle and Henry, who had rallied behind Derek's vision. They started calling Samantha to discuss potential strategies and to check in on Derek's morale. One Saturday afternoon, Samantha joined Derek, Michelle, and Henry at Derek's penthouse. The intention was to create a united front, solidifying how Derek would present his case at the next official gathering of shareholders. The living room table was spread with documents, laptops, and cups of coffee. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing the city skyline beyond. Michelle took the lead, pointing to a chart that showed the company's financial performance over the past year. "This is strong data, Derek. You've grown market share despite channeling funds into charitable programs. That's not something Robert can easily dispute." Henry nodded in agreement, tapping a pen against the table. "Precisely. We also have stats on employee retention and satisfaction. When the workforce believes in the company's ethics, productivity goes up." He glanced at Samantha with a friendly grin. "That's where your example of integrity might come in. It sparked a lot of conversations about leadership beyond spreadsheets." Samantha flushed, grateful yet humble. "I'm just happy to see how it all fits together. I didn't realize until now how honesty at the top can trickle down to benefit everyone." Derek sifted through another stack of papers. "Still, Robert's banking on fear, telling shareholders that focusing on ethics undercuts profitability. We need to show them that an ethical approach is not only moral, but sustainable for the long haul." Samantha's stomach fluttered at the thought of being involved in such high-level planning. It wasn't long ago that her daily focus was simply paying rent and avoiding conflict. Yet here she was, offering input and moral support to a group of influential professionals. The shift felt surreal, but in a grounding way, a testament to how far she'd come by staying true to her core values. After hours of brainstorming, they agreed on a plan. Derek would present a clear, fact-based argument about the company's profitable ethics and philanthropic ventures, backed by Michelle and Henry's evidence. Samantha would be there to answer any direct questions about her role in Derek's life, but they'd keep it brief and honest, avoiding emotional entanglements that Robert might exploit. Michelle closed her laptop, stretching her arms overhead. "That's enough for one day," she said with a smile. "Anyone else starving?" They turned the meeting into a casual dinner, ordering takeout from a local Thai place. Over plates of fragrant noodles, they chatted about lighter topics, Henry's children, Michelle's latest fitness craze. Samantha laughed along, relieved to see Derek's tension easing. At one point, Henry teased Derek about a silly college memory, and Samantha caught Derek's eye, sharing a fond smile. This informal camaraderie felt like a lifeline in the midst of corporate warfare. Later, when Michelle and Henry departed, Samantha lingered to help Derek tidy up. She gathered empty cartons and stacked the used dishes near the sink. A comfortable silence stretched between them, the city lights twinkling through the panoramic windows. Derek leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You know, if you ever get tired of waiting tables, there's always a place for someone like you in my company," he said gently. She paused, setting down a plate. "I appreciate that," she replied, meeting his gaze, "but I'm not ready to leave the diner just yet. It's been my anchor for so long. Besides, I'm just starting to volunteer at the community center. That feels right for me now." He offered a warm smile. "I understand. I just want you to know you have options." The realization struck her that, indeed, she did. She had options she'd never dreamed of, not because she latched onto someone else's success, but because her honesty and courage had opened doors. For the first time in her adult life, she felt she could choose a path based on genuine passion, not desperation. Gathering the last of the trash, Samantha glanced at Derek. "One step at a time, right?" she said softly. He nodded, walking her to the door. "Exactly." They stood for a moment in quiet intimacy, aware that the final confrontation with Robert loomed. But the shared determination in the air made Samantha believe they could handle it. With plans laid out, allies at their side, and honest conviction fueling them, they were prepared to face whatever came next, together. The atmosphere at the next shareholder assembly felt more charged than the previous board meeting. Rows of seats filled a spacious auditorium in the heart of the corporate tower, the stage area set with microphones and a long table. Investors, analysts, and staff members crowded in, hushed yet buzzing with anticipation. Samantha sat near Derek, heart pounding. On stage with them were Michelle, Henry, and a few other key figures who supported Derek's vision. Robert Harris stood opposite, flanked by his own allies. A large screen behind them displayed slides of financial data, logos, and mission statements. Samantha swallowed hard, remembering how high the stakes were. The meeting began with routine formalities, approvals of minor motions, yearly performance summaries. Then came the central debate, whether Derek's leadership should continue or if the company would pivot under Robert's more profit-driven plan. Robert stepped forward first, addressing the crowd. He rattled off concerns about distracted leadership, risky philanthropic spending, and unorthodox personal entanglements. His voice carried an assured, commanding edge. When it was Derek's turn, he approached the microphone with measured calm. Michelle clicked through slides, revealing charts that illustrated solid financial performance, increased client engagement, and high employee satisfaction. Henry chimed in with data points showing the tangible benefits of Derek's ethical initiatives. The crowd rustled with interest, some nodding in approval, others wearing guarded expressions. At one point, Robert interrupted. "That's all well and good, but Derek's personal life has taken center stage in the press. We can't ignore how that distracts from the serious work of this corporation." An uneasy hush fell. Samantha, seated just behind Derek, felt the tension like static electricity. Derek cleared his throat. "Yes, there's been media attention," he acknowledged. "But let's address it honestly. Samantha Hill is here today, not as some gold digger or opportunist, but as someone who exemplifies the integrity we want in this company. She's the woman who returned a wallet with thousands of dollars in it, money she desperately needed, without taking a cent. If there's any distraction, it's the gossip, not her character." He nodded to Samantha, silently inviting her to speak if she wished. Gathering her courage, she stood and approached the microphone. Her heart hammered, but the memory of her journey steadied her voice. "I'm not here to cause scandal or to profit," she began, eyes scanning the audience. "I work in a diner and volunteer at a community center. When I found Derek's wallet, I returned it because it was the right thing to do. I didn't expect anything from him, let alone all of this." A soft murmur ran through the crowd. She pressed on, recalling the tips she and Derek had rehearsed. "In the time I've known him, I've seen a man who genuinely wants to help others, not just chase profit. If you're worried about ethics hurting the bottom line, look at the numbers. The company is flourishing under his leadership." She paused, her voice thickening. "If you choose Robert's path, maybe you'll get a short-term financial bump, but you'll lose the heart that makes this organization a positive force. Think about the employees, the communities helped by charitable programs. Derek's vision isn't just about feeling good, it's sustainable, and it's right." Applause erupted from a section of the audience, likely employees who admired Derek's moral stance. Samantha stepped back, relieved the moment was over. Robert's face looked set in stone, but he said nothing, perhaps because any attack on her was likely to backfire. The assembly took a tense turn when a lead shareholder, a silver-haired man who had remained quiet, rose to speak. "As an investor, I've seen many CEOs come and go. The ones who last aren't always the ones making quick profits. They're the ones forging trust and loyalty. Mr. Morris, you have my vote." He nodded toward Derek. Applause spread wider now, and Robert's jaw visibly tightened. One by one, other shareholders cast their votes. Several aligned with Robert's purely profit-centered approach, but more sided with Derek, citing not just numbers, but also a belief in the company's long-term reputation. When the final tally was announced, a majority stood behind Derek, confirming him as CEO and effectively quashing Robert's bid for control. A hush fell, then a burst of cheers and claps from employees and supporters. Derek exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief, while Michelle and Henry exchanged celebratory grins. Samantha felt tears prick at her eyes. Derek turned to her, took her hand, and squeezed it, the gratitude in his gaze wordless but profound. Their victory wasn't just personal, it was a testament that integrity could win against cynicism. Robert quickly gathered his papers, exiting the stage with a chilly glare. But the triumphant mood belonged to Derek and those who had believed in him all along. In that moment, Samantha's chest swelled with pride. Their struggles, rumors, and anxieties had led to this shining validation. Honesty, when backed by perseverance and courage, could indeed triumph. And as people crowded around Derek offering congratulations, Samantha stood beside him, tears of joy silently slipping down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the profound affirmation that one simple act of decency had changed so many lives. In the days that followed Derek's decisive victory at the shareholder assembly, Samantha Hill found herself craving a return to normalcy. She felt she'd been living at the edges of two different worlds, the fast-paced corporate sphere and her own humble routine in New Jersey. Eager to regain her footing, she went back to the lakeside diner for her regular shift. The morning light spilled through the diner's large windows, illuminating the same checkered floors and chrome fixtures that had greeted her day after day. Somehow, the sight of those familiar surfaces felt unusually comforting. As she walked in, wearing her faded uniform, Rachel looked up from behind the counter, beaming. "There's our celebrity," Rachel teased, though her voice held genuine warmth. "Congrats on everything. Feels like we should be throwing confetti or something." Samantha gave an embarrassed chuckle, sliding an order pad into her apron pocket. "Oh, hush. I'm still the same me, just with a few more life experiences under my belt." She had no intention of leaving the diner just because Derek was now securely in his CEO role. This place represented a kind of grounding she wasn't ready to give up. Throughout the morning, regulars came and went, offering congratulations. One elderly man, Mr. Finnegan, tapped his cane on the tile floor as he told her, "Read about you in the local paper again. This time, they're calling you a role model for honesty." I said to myself, that's our Samantha. She couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. "Thank you, Mr. Finnegan. I'm just happy things are settling down." Between refilling coffee mugs and delivering orders of scrambled eggs and crispy bacon, Samantha noticed a marked difference in how people looked at her now. Where once there'd been suspicion or intrusive prying, many patrons seemed genuinely respectful. The whispered comments were fewer, replaced by nods of goodwill or small words of praise. Even Chris, who'd once made snide remarks about her millionaire connection, kept his head down and stuck to the day's tasks. During her lunch break, she stepped outside into the mild weather, taking a seat on a bench behind the diner. The faint aroma of French fries drifted from the kitchen vents, blending with the fresh air. Closing her eyes, she let herself enjoy the moment of stillness. Memories of the past few weeks danced through her mind. The stressful board meeting, Robert's threats, the media circus. Yet she also remembered the compassion of new friends like Michelle and Henry, the unwavering support of Rachel and Sierra, Henderson, and Derek's steady hand in hers. Everything seemed to converge, reminding her how one simple act of honesty had led to this whirlwind. She recalled Derek's face that day when the final vote came in, the gratitude in his eyes as he realized he'd kept his position, and not just that. He'd earned renewed trust from key investors. Samantha couldn't help but smile at the memory. He'd texted her that morning, asking if she wanted to celebrate. She told him, "Maybe soon, but first I need to clear my head back at the diner. It's my home base." As she finished her break and got up from the bench, the side door swung open. Sra. Evelyn Henderson, silver-haired and wearing her usual no-nonsense expression, stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, motioning to the bench. Samantha sat down again, nodding. "Not at all." Sra. Henderson lowered herself carefully. "Heard the news about the assembly? Sounds like you and Derek gave those naysayers a run for their money." A proud twinkle appeared in her eyes. "You've come a long way since that day you found the wallet, huh?" Samantha looked down at her scuffed sneakers. "I guess so. Sometimes it doesn't feel real, but I'm grateful that everything turned out okay. Better than okay, really." The older woman patted Samantha's shoulder affectionately. "You deserve the credit for staying true to yourself. Not everyone would have handled things with such grace." A warm sensation filled Samantha's chest. As she headed back inside to finish her shift, she realized that returning to these familiar confines, these roots, didn't just bring comfort. It also reminded her that no matter how far she ventured into Derek's sphere or any other realm, she carried her core values with her. And she decided that was a treasure worth more than any corporate windfall or fleeting fame. 1 week later, Samantha found herself in a folding chair at the local community center, about to speak in front of a small gathering. She'd been volunteering here regularly, helping kids improve their reading skills, but today's event was different. The center's director, Evelyn Clark, had invited Samantha to talk about her journey, the story of returning Derek's wallet and facing the subsequent trials. She had agreed, albeit nervously, figuring her perspective might inspire others who struggled with self-doubt or tough moral choices. Now she sat in a modest recreation room with pale yellow walls and a squeaky floor, noticing a mix of adults and teenagers filling the chairs. Some looked curious, others bored, a few shyly excited. Evelyn stepped up to a small podium at the front of the room, her voice echoing slightly in the acoustics. "Thank you all for coming. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Samantha Hill, someone who has shown that integrity isn't a thing of the past. She's graciously agreed to share a piece of her life with us." A gentle wave of applause rippled through the room as Samantha rose. Her hands felt clammy, but she recalled how her honesty had carried her this far. She set her note cards on the podium, took a breath, and began. "Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha, and I'm a waitress at the Lakeside Diner. For most of my life, I've just tried to get by, pay bills, be kind, and keep a low profile. Then one day I found a wallet." She recounted the highlights of her story. The temptation she'd felt to keep even a portion of the cash, the decision that she ultimately made to turn everything in, and how that single moment catapulted her into a world she never expected. She spoke candidly about the swarm of rumors, the media's intrusion, and the fear that she might be crushed under so much attention. Yet she also emphasized the positive outcomes, the deepening of her own self-belief, the friendships formed, and Derek's transformation within his own company. "To be honest," she confessed, meeting the eyes of a few teenagers in the front row, "I was scared half the time, but every step of the way I tried to choose what felt right to me, and believe me, it wasn't always the popular choice." A hush settled over the room. She saw a middle-aged woman nodding along, tears gleaming at the corners of her eyes. A young man with tattoos on his arms leaned forward, listening intently. Encouraged, Samantha added, "Being honest doesn't mean life becomes easy, but it means you can sleep at night. It means you respect yourself enough to do what's right, even if nobody's watching or if everyone's watching." When she finished, a wave of applause shook the small space. A few people stood, clapping more vigorously, while others whistled or beamed at her. Samantha felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of pride and humility. She took a small bow, then stepped away from the podium as Evelyn came forward to thank her. Afterward, a line formed of people wanting to ask questions or simply share their own stories. One older gentleman described how he once found a purse at a grocery store and struggled with similar temptations. A teenage girl said she admired Samantha's courage to stand up to critics. Samantha listened, hands clasped, feeling each person's vulnerability and appreciation. That sense of connection blossomed in her heart, replacing any lingering nerves. Toward the end, as the crowd thinned, Derek appeared in the doorway. He'd quietly slipped into the back row, a soft smile lighting his face. Samantha's pulse skipped. He must have come straight from work, given his rolled-up shirt sleeves and the faint look of fatigue around his eyes, but the pride in his expression was unmistakable. She walked over and greeted him with a warm hug, ignoring the curious stares. "You didn't have to come," she whispered, feeling her throat tighten with emotion. "I wouldn't miss it," he replied simply, brushing a light kiss on her forehead. "Hearing you speak, seeing how these folks responded, it's incredible. I'm so proud of you." In that moment, Samantha realized she wasn't just a quiet waitress living on the edges anymore. By sharing her journey, she was offering hope to people she'd never met before. And as she took Derek's hand, an overwhelming sense of gratitude swept over her. Life was still peppered with challenges, but she had found her voice, a voice that carried the power to encourage others not to give up on simple, decent acts. Before she knew it, the community center had practically adopted Samantha as part of its volunteer family. She continued leading reading sessions for local kids and, at Evelyn Clark's urging, even helped organize small workshops on financial literacy, basic job skills, and, most importantly, personal ethics. Her transformation from just a waitress to a figure of local inspiration felt surreal at times. Still, Samantha approached it all with humility, reminding herself that she was learning as much as the people she guided. Meanwhile, Derek threw himself into reshaping his company's culture. With Robert Harris removed from any real power, Derek set up a dedicated philanthropic division to ensure ongoing support for educational programs and community centers. He also took steps to create mentorship opportunities for entry-level employees, a move intended to foster a sense of growth and purpose within the company. Reports of a more caring, engaged work environment circulated among employees, boosting morale and productivity. Samantha often visited Derek's offices, not to meddle in corporate matters, but to see firsthand how these new initiatives were unfolding. On one such visit, she bumped into a junior employee in the hallway, just a young woman in her early 20s, looking frazzled with a stack of folders. She confessed to Samantha that she'd been nervous about speaking up with her ideas in a male-dominated department. Samantha offered a few words of encouragement, the same kind of gentle push that Sarah Henderson had once given her. The conversation left her with the sense that even a brief moment of empathy could ripple through someone else's life. Over time, Michelle and Henry also became close friends of Samantha's outside the corporate setting. They invited her to family barbecues, introduced her to neighbors, and treated her like part of their inner circle. She was no longer an outsider peeking into a privileged world. She was an equal participant, warmly welcomed for her genuine spirit. Every so often, Samantha still had doubts. Could she truly straddle these two worlds, the modest diner life and the realm of board meetings and charity galas? She voiced this concern to Derek one evening as they sat on his balcony, overlooking the city's glittering skyline. He listened intently, then gently laced his fingers with hers. "Why choose one world?" You're doing meaningful things in both. You don't have to fit into some neat box, she smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. I guess I'm still learning that people aren't defined by where they come from or how much they earn, but by how they treat others. One weekend, they decided to host a small event at the community center to celebrate the success of the reading program. Samantha put together a slideshow of the kids' progress, photos of them poring over books, proudly displaying their new vocabulary words. Derek arranged a modest donation to update the center's supplies, and Michelle handled the catering. Dozens of families showed up, laughter echoing off the walls. As Samantha mingled with parents and children, she caught sight of Derek chatting with the center's director. He wore a relaxed smile, looking comfortable in his casual polo shirt rather than a suit. Off to the side, Henry was showing a group of kids how to toss a basketball properly, while Michelle passed out homemade cookies. The entire scene glowed with warmth and connection. Pausing near a corkboard plastered with children's drawings, Samantha realized how seamlessly her once separate worlds had begun to merge. She could almost pinpoint the day it all began, when she picked up a forgotten wallet in the diner. At the time, she'd only hoped to do the right thing and maybe get through another hectic shift. Who would have imagined that a simple act of honesty would be the seed for a legacy of goodwill? When the festivities wound down and people trickled out, Samantha lingered in the nearly empty hall. A child's drawing caught her eye. It showed two stick figures labeled Sam and Mr. Morris, each holding a brightly colored heart. Her chest tightened with emotion. She gently removed the drawing from the board, intending to keep it as a reminder of how small deeds could blossom into something remarkable. She found Derek standing at the doorway, waiting for her. With the vibrant artwork in her hands, she approached him, tears of gratitude welling up. It was a moment that encapsulated everything: the diner, the corporate battles, the nights of worry, and the mornings of hope. Each thread of her life had woven into a tapestry she never could have foreseen, and in that weaving, honesty was the thread that held it all together. A cool autumn breeze swept through the small community auditorium on the day Samantha and Derek decided to formalize their partnership, both in philanthropy and aids in a quiet and personal sense in life. Rows of foldable chairs filled the central space, decorated simply with fresh flowers and garlands of leaves that hinted at the changing season. Friends, co-workers, volunteers, and even some of the diner's regulars gathered. An eclectic crowd brought together by a love for Samantha's and Derek's story. It wasn't a wedding, not officially. Samantha wasn't ready for that step just yet, and Derek respected her pace. Instead, they'd organized a ceremony to announce the official launch of the Morris Hill Foundation, a charitable arm focused on educational support, community enrichment, and everyday acts of kindness. Derek insisted that the entire event be down to earth, with minimal fuss or corporate pomp. Samantha stood backstage in a simple, cream-colored dress that fluttered around her calves. She clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers Rachel had hand-picked from a local farm. Her heart pounded in anticipation, but it was a gentle kind of excitement rather than the anxious tension she'd faced so often before. She peered through a gap in the curtain, spotting Rachel in the front row next to Mike Roberts. Michelle and Henry sat close by, sharing laughter with Esiara, Henderson. Even Chris was there, albeit looking a bit self-conscious in his collared shirt. On the stage, the auditorium's modest microphone waited. Derek stood off to the side, wearing a navy blazer that complemented his warm complexion. He spotted Samantha peeking from behind the curtain and winked, a silent reassurance that they were in this together. When the music began, soft guitar strumming from a local musician, the audience fell quiet. Samantha and Derek emerged from opposite sides of the stage, meeting at the center. Warm applause and murmured cheers echoed through the hall. Samantha's gaze landed on Derek's eyes, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded. Here was the man whose lost wallet she'd once found beneath a diner table, the same man who had become her confidant, champion, and friend. Clearing his throat, Derek addressed the crowd. "Thank you for coming today. This isn't a formal wedding or anything like that," he said with a grin. "But it is a celebration of honesty, community, and hope." He recounted how Samantha's simple act had caught his attention, then her integrity and warmth had captured his heart. "Because of her, I realized I wanted to build something more meaningful than profits alone," Derek continued, voice slightly choked with emotion. "So, with her guidance, we're creating the Morris Hill Foundation. We hope to fund projects that encourage everyday people to believe in their ability to make a difference." Samantha stepped up next, hands trembling around her bouquet. She smiled out at the audience, tears already pricking her eyes. "I never set out to be a public figure. I was just a waitress trying to make ends meet, but doing the right thing sometimes has a bigger ripple effect than we imagine." She glanced toward Sarah. Henderson, remembering the older woman's early advice, what started as returning a wallet turned into an entire journey, one that showed me that honesty matters, no matter how small it seems. Her gaze swept over the community center volunteers, the diner staff, and the new allies from Derek's corporate world. They all seemed united in this moment. Samantha swallowed, feeling a sob tighten her throat. "We've named this foundation after both of us, but it belongs to everyone here. Each of you added something, be it support, friendship, or simply believing in us. Thank you." The crowd erupted into cheers, some teary-eyed themselves. Michelle dabbed her eyes with a tissue, and Henry patted her shoulder. Rachel grinned widely, applauding with fierce enthusiasm. The guitarist strummed a few notes of celebration, and for a moment, time stood still in the auditorium. Samantha felt overwhelmed by the swell of love and possibility in the air. Derek lightly kissed her cheek as the applause softened, and she closed her eyes against his warmth. They both knew this wasn't the pinnacle of their story, but rather the prologue to the next chapter, one where they continued to grow, face new challenges, and invest in the lives of others. She could almost see a younger version of herself, exhausted from waiting tables, worried about rent, standing in the shadows. That Samantha would have laughed at the notion of founding a charitable organization with a millionaire CEO. Yet here she stood, tears slipping down her face, filled with gratitude that her everyday honesty had blossomed into something so profound. As the ceremony ended, friends and acquaintances surged onto the stage, offering hugs and congratulations. Samantha and Derek embraced the chaos of well-wishers. In that swirl of emotion, Samantha felt tears of pure joy slip down her cheeks. Their future wasn't about lavish wealth or lofty titles. It was about continuing to do what felt right and sharing that inspiration with others. And so they began this new chapter, not a fairy tale ending, but a deeply real, soul-touching beginning that proved one ordinary act of goodness could turn into a lifetime of extraordinary change. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.